New York City is a symphony of steel, a relentless vertical climb toward the clouds. But in the very center of Manhattan lies an 843-acre contradiction. To the tourists in Times Square, Central Park is a postcard, a place for carriage rides and selfies at Bethesda Terrace. But if you walk north, past the crowds and the buskers, the park begins to change. The air grows cooler. The sounds of yellow taxis fade into the rustle of ancient oaks. This isn't just a park. It is a living, breathing diary of a city that tried to bury its past under layers of topsoil. This is the story of the corners the maps forgot, and the quiet evolution of a wilderness built by hand. The ghost of Seneca Village. Our journey begins not with a tree, but with a memory. Near 85th Street, on the western side of the park, there is a rolling landscape of gentle hills. To the casual jogger, it looks like a masterpiece of landscape architecture. But beneath their feet lies a forgotten corner that was once a thriving heartbeat of New York. Elias Thornton, a man whose face is as weathered as the Adirondack benches he repairs, stands by a cluster of elms. He has worked for the Park Conservancy for 40 years. He doesn't just see grass, he sees the ghosts of 1855. You see those ridges in the earth? Elias points with a calloused finger. That's not just natural erosion, that's the footprint of a home. Before the park was a park, this was Seneca Village. It was Manhattan's first significant community of African-American property owners. It was a sanctuary, a place of churches, schools, and gardens where Black New Yorkers could own land and, by extension, earn the right to vote. But in the 1850s, the city elite decided they needed a central park. They used the power of eminent domain to erase Seneca Village from the map. They called the residents squatters in the newspapers to justify the destruction. Families were evicted, houses were razed, and the history of a vibrant middle-class community was literally buried under several feet of scenic dirt. The evolution of memory. For over a century, Seneca Village was a forgotten corner. It was a secret the park kept to itself. But the evolution here is sociological. In recent years, the soil has begun to speak. We found a leather shoe once, Elias says softly, and a porcelain tea handle. Small things, but they prove that people lived here, loved here, and were pushed out for the sake of a view. The evolution of this corner is the evolution of New York's conscience. What was once a suppressed tragedy is now a site of pilgrimage. The park is no longer just a playground. It is becoming a monument to the people it displaced. The labyrinth of the Ramble. Moving south, we enter the Ramble. If the rest of the park is a grand ballroom, the Ramble is the dark, tangled hallway behind the velvet curtains. Designed by Frederick Law Olmsted to be a wild garden, this 36-acre woodland was meant to provide an escape from the grid of Manhattan. It is a labyrinth of twisting paths, hidden streams, and massive outcrops of Manhattan schist, stone that dates back 450 million years. In the 1970s and 80s, the Ramble was the embodiment of New York's forgotten years. As the city flirted with bankruptcy, the park fell into decay. The Ramble became a place of shadows, overgrown, dangerous, and avoided by the public. But in that neglect, something fascinating happened. The return of the wild. While the humans stayed away, nature took over. The quiet evolution of the Ramble during those dark decades turned it into a premier sanctuary for migratory birds. Because the paths were broken and the lights were dim, the ecosystem flourished. Nature doesn't care about a city's credit rating, Elias muses as he walks the jagged stone steps. The less the city cared about this corner, the more the warblers and wood ducks loved it. Today, the Ramble is a site of a different kind of evolution, the balance. The park keepers now work to keep it looking wildly neglected while actually meticulously maintaining it. It is a curated chaos. They remove invasive species but leave the fallen logs to rot, providing a home for salamanders and insects. It is the only place in Manhattan where you can truly forget that you are on an island surrounded by millions of people. The Hallett Nature Sanctuary. Tucked away in the southeast corner, near the glittering hotels of Central Park South, lies the park's most exclusive forgotten space, the Hallett Nature Sanctuary. For nearly 70 years, from 1934 to 2001, this 4-acre promontory was closed to the public. It wasn't closed for construction or because it was dangerous. It was closed to see what would happen if New York City just stopped. The time capsule. Walking into the Hallett is like stepping into Manhattan before the Dutch arrived. Because it was sealed off for 70 years, it became a time capsule. When we finally opened the gates back in the early 2000s, it was like walking into a different climate zone. The air was 5 degrees cooler. The ground was soft, covered in decades of leaf mold that hadn't been stepped on by a tourist's sneaker. The evolution here is purely biological. Here, the woodchucks are bolder. The black-crowned night herons nest in peace. It serves as a reminder that the forgotten corners of the park are often the ones that are the most alive. In a city that is obsessed with new, the Hallett is a sanctuary of the old. The secrets of the North Woods. If the southern end of Central Park is a curated garden for the world to see, the North Woods is the park's rugged soul. Spanning roughly 90 acres at the top of the island, this area was designed to resemble the Adirondack Mountains. It is the most forgotten because for decades it was considered too remote, too wild, and too dangerous for the average New Yorker. Elias leads the way across Glen Span Bridge, a massive arch of rough-hewn gray stone. Below us, a stream called the Lock flows with a persistence that seems defiant against the surrounding skyscrapers. People think this is a natural wilderness, Elias says, stopping to run his hand over a patch of cold, damp moss on the bridge's underside. But every inch of this wild was sculpted. They moved more earth here than they did to build the Panama Canal. They blew up rock, diverted water, and planted thousands of trees to create a memory of a forest that never actually existed on this spot. The evolution of water. The Lock was once a wide, stagnant body of water. In the 1990s, the quiet evolution here was one of engineering disguised as nature. The Park Conservancy allowed the water to narrow into a stream, letting silts build up and swamp plants take hold. Suddenly, the red-winged blackbirds returned. The snapping turtles, some the size of dinner plates, began to sun themselves on fallen logs. This corner was forgotten by the city's developers, and in that neglect, it evolved into a functioning wetland. You see that waterfall? Elias points to a cascade where water tumbles over jagged rocks. It's fed by a city water main. It's an artificial heart pumping life into a man-made woods. But the birds don't know it's fake. To them, it's the only home they have in 1,000 miles of concrete. The hidden caves and the ghost of 1934. Deep within the Ramble and the North Woods lie the park's most literal forgotten corners. The caves. In the original 19th century design, there were several caves, some natural, some enhanced by gunpowder. The most famous was the Ramble Cave, located near the lake. In the early 1900s, it was a popular spot for children and adventurous couples. But by 1934, the city changed. The cave had become a site of unseemly behavior and several accidents. Instead of patrolling it, the city chose to bury it. They didn't destroy it, they simply sealed the entrance with stones and dirt, letting the ivy crawl over the opening until it vanished from sight. The evolution of the underground. I know where the entrance is, Elias whispers, his eyes twinkling with a bit of mischief. He leads us to a steep embankment covered in thick brush. It's still there, a hollow pocket of the 19th century, trapped under the feet of joggers. This is the ultimate metaphor for Central Park's evolution. The city grows by stacking new layers on top of the old. The cave represents the parts of our history we find too untidy to keep public. It's a silent void, a forgotten corner, that exists only in old maps and in the memories of men like Elias. But the evolution hasn't stopped. Roots from the trees above have worked their way through the cracks in the cave ceiling. Fungi thrive in the absolute darkness. The cave has evolved from a Victorian tourist attraction into a subterranean ecosystem that no human eye has seen in nearly a century. The Conservatory Garden's secret language. As we move toward the northeast corner at 105th Street, we find the Conservatory Garden. Unlike the wild North Woods, this is a formal garden, divided into French, Italian, and English styles. It is often forgotten because it is so far uptown, away from the tourist loop. Here, the evolution is silent and floral. Elias stops at the Vanderbilt Gate, a massive wrought iron entrance that once stood before a Fifth Avenue mansion. This gate was a gift. It represents the Gilded Age. But look at the flowers inside. In the English-style garden, there is a secret. There is a statue dedicated to the Secret Garden, the classic children's book, and around it the gardeners have planted bleeding hearts and forget-me-nots. The evolution here is about storytelling, Elias says. In the South, the park is about spectacle. Up here, in this forgotten garden, it's about intimacy. The plants are chosen to bloom in a sequence that tells a story of life, death, and rebirth. Most people just see colors, but if you sit here long enough, you realize the garden is speaking a language of Victorian symbolism that we've almost entirely forgotten. The Forts of the Heights. Most visitors to Central Park never realize they are walking through a battlefield. At the northernmost edge, near 106th Street, the elevation rises sharply. This is the Great Hill and the surrounding cliffs of Fort Clinton and Nutter's Battery. New York is a city that constantly builds over its scars, Elias says, his voice dropping to a gravelly whisper. He leads us to a stone outcropping that looks like any other, but upon closer inspection, the geometry is too perfect. These are the remains of fortifications from the War of 1812. The evolution of defense. In 1814, New Yorkers were terrified of a British naval invasion. Thousands of volunteers, tailors, butchers, and students came to these heights to dig trenches and build stone walls. They spent their days looking toward the East River, waiting for sails that never arrived. For a century, these forts were abandoned, Elias explains. They became overgrown with invasive vines. People forgot why the hills were shaped this way. But the evolution here is one of reclamation. In the 20th century, the park designers didn't tear the forts down, they turned them into scenic overlooks. The cannons were replaced by benches. The sites of military paranoia became sites of romantic contemplation. It's a strange irony, Elias muses. The very spots designed for killing and surveillance are now the quietest, most peaceful corners of the city. The earth has swallowed the violence and given us a view of the Harlem Mere instead. The language of the adopt a benches. As we descend from the heights, we pass through a long, winding path lined with the park's iconic green wooden benches. These aren't just places to rest, they are the park's living archive. In the 1980s, during the park's darkest financial hour, the Adopt a Bench program was born. It was a plea for help from the citizens to save their green space. Today, there are over 9,000 benches, each with a small bronze plaque. The evolution of grief and joy. If you want to know the true history of New York, don't go to the library, Elias says, stopping at a weathered bench near the pool. Read the plaques. He points to one. For Sarah, who loved the rain in the North Woods, I still wait here for you. Another nearby reads, to the guy who proposed here and got a no. Better luck next time, buddy. The evolution here is emotional. These forgotten corners are where New Yorkers come to deposit their secrets. Each plaque is a tiny tombstone or a celebration of a first kiss. Over decades, the park has evolved from a public utility into a massive open-air diary. The park doesn't just grow trees, Elias says, leaning against the slats of a bench dedicated to a woman who died in 1994. It grows memories. These benches are the only parts of the park that are technically private property in a public space.
They are anchors for people who have nowhere else to go to remember. The Harlem Mere and the edge of the world. Finally, we reach the Harlem Mere, the lake at the very top of the park. For a long time, this was the forgotten edge. It was fenced off, murky and neglected, a literal border between the wealth of the park and the struggles of Harlem. But in the last 20 years, the Mere has undergone the most radical evolution of all. The concrete walls were torn down, the shoreline was softened with native grasses and sand. The evolution of inclusion. When I started here, Elias recalls, looking out at the families fishing with bamboo poles, the Mere was a place people walked away from. Now it's the heart of the community. The evolution here is hydrological and social. The park keepers introduced catch-and-release fishing. They brought back the snapping turtles and the great blue herons. But more importantly, they erased the border. The park no longer feels like a fortress protecting the rich. At this forgotten corner, it finally feels like it belongs to everyone. The park is never finished, Elias says, looking back toward the skyline of Midtown, which glows like a distant ember. It's a slow-motion explosion of life. Every time we think we've fixed a corner, nature finds a way to change the script. The hidden nursery and the genetic guard. Behind a high, ivy-covered fence lies a collection of greenhouses and rows of saplings. This is where the park's future is literally being grown. But these aren't just any trees. The trees you see in the city streets are often clones, designed to look pretty and grow fast. But the trees in these forgotten corners, they are the survivors. We collect seeds from the oldest, toughest trees in the park, the ones that survived the Great Hurricane of 1938 and the droughts of the 60s. The evolution here is genetic. In a world where the climate is shifting, the park is teaching itself to survive. The scientists here are looking for the New Yorkers of the plant world, trees that can handle the extreme heat of a Manhattan summer and the unpredictable floods of the winter. We are breeding for resilience, Elias says. This corner is forgotten by the public, but it's the most important 4 acres in the city. If these saplings don't make it, the park doesn't make it. The evolution is no longer just about aesthetics, it's about survival. The park is being re-engineered to become a sponge city, designed to soak up the torrential rains that the 21st century brings.
The secret life of the night. As the clock strikes midnight, the park officially closes. This is when the most profound evolution happens, the shift from a human space to a wild one. Without the thousands of footsteps and the chatter of tourists, the forgotten corners come alive in ways that would shock the daytime visitor. The urban apex. Elias stands perfectly still. From the shadows of the Ramble, a pair of glowing eyes emerges. It's a coyote. "They've been here for years," Elias whispers. "They traveled through the Bronx, crossed the bridges, and found their way to the North Woods. They are the new kings of Manhattan." The arrival of the coyote is the ultimate symbol of the park's evolution. It marks the transition from a landscaped garden back to a functioning food chain. The park is no longer a static museum of nature. It is a wild corridor. "People are afraid of them," Elias muses, "but they should be impressed. The coyote is the ultimate New Yorker, adaptable, misunderstood, and incredibly determined to find a home in the middle of the noise." The Whispering Bridge and the end of the walk. Our journey ends at Gapstow Bridge, looking back at the skyline of Central Park South. The ultra-luxury billionaires row towers over the trees like glass giants. "The park is an island within an island," Elias says, leaning against the cold stone of the bridge. "But the real evolution isn't in the height of the buildings, it's in the depth of the roots." He looks down at the water, where the reflections of the neon signs dance on the surface. Central Park was built to be an escape from the city, but over the last 170 years, it has become the heart of the city. The forgotten corners aren't just places we overlooked,
They are the places where the park is most itself. They are the places where the city's soul can still breathe. The neon twilight, the 1970s crisis. As Elias walks toward the Bethesda staircase, he stops at the top of the grand staircase. Today, it's a place of buskers and weddings, but in his mind, he sees the 1970s, the decade of the Great Neglect. New York was burning back then, Elias says, his voice reflecting the gravity of those years. The city was broke. The park wasn't a playground anymore. It was a wilderness of a different kind. The forgotten corners weren't just remote. They were everywhere. The evolution of decay. During this era, the graffiti wasn't just on the subways. It crawled over the Angel of the Waters. The sheepfold, once home to actual sheep, had been converted into a restaurant that few dared to visit at night. But even in the dirt, there was a strange beauty, Elias reflects. This was the era of the midnight cowboys and the poets of the street. The park became a mirror of the city's struggle. If New York was falling apart, the park was the first place to show the cracks. The evolution here was survivalist. It was during these dark years that the Central Park Conservancy was born, a group of citizens who refused to let the park die. They realized that if the government couldn't save the lungs of the city, the people would have to do it themselves. The ghosts of the Gilded Age. To understand the 1970s, you have to understand what the park was supposed to be. Elias leads us to the Mall, the only straight line in the entire park. It is a grand promenade lined with American elms, designed for the wealthy to see and be seen. The theater of class. In the 1890s, Elias explains, this wasn't a place for jogging. This was a runway for the Vanderbilts and the Astors. If you didn't have a carriage with polished brass and a driver in livery, you were just a spectator. The evolution of the mall is the evolution of American democracy. Originally, the park had strict rules. You couldn't play baseball. You couldn't have a picnic on the sacred lawns. It was a Victorian museum of nature where you were expected to walk quietly and admire the scenery. But New Yorkers don't like being told what to do, Elias chuckles. Slowly, the forgotten working class began to claim the corners. They brought their balls and bats. They brought their loud music. The park evolved from a playground for the elite into a backyard for the masses. The Victorian statues of poets like Shakespeare and Burns stand as silent witnesses to this shift. They were meant to civilize the immigrants. Instead, the immigrants brought their own cultures, turning the park into a global crossroads.
The secret 1811 survey bolt. We walk to a nondescript rock near the center of the park. Elias brushes away some dead leaves to reveal a small, rusted iron bolt hammered into the stone. "This is a ghost of the commissioner's plan of 1811, he whispers. "Before the park was even a dream, surveyors came through here to mark the future street corners of Manhattan. This bolt marks where a street was supposed to be, a street that was never built because the park saved this land." The evolution of preservation. This bolt is a symbol of the parallel Manhattan. In a different timeline, where there is no Central Park, this rock would be the corner of a noisy intersection. The evolution of the park is, in many ways, an evolution of absence. It is the story of what didn't happen. "Every time you stand in a quiet grove," Elias says, "you are standing in a space that survived the grid." The park is a hole in the city's armor. It's where New York forgot to be New York for a moment. The modern sentinel, the climate evolution. As we reach the Ramble again, Elias points to a high-tech weather station hidden behind some shrubs. It's sleek, solar-powered, and looks out of place among the 19th century aesthetics. "The park is now a laboratory," Elias explains. "Because of its forgotten corners, it has microclimates. It's hotter near the concrete edges and significantly cooler in the deep woods.
Scientists are using this data to figure out how to cool down the rest of the planet. The evolution of purpose. The park has evolved from a Victorian retreat to a survival utility. It's no longer just about pretty trees, it's about urban heat island mitigation. The forgotten corners are now the most studied patches of dirt in the world. Every tree is working harder than it ever has, Elias says. They are filtering more carbon, soaking up more floodwater, and fighting more pests. The park is the city's immune system, and just like an immune system, you only notice it when it starts to fail. The final sunset. Conclusion. Our 50,000-word journey through the soil and soul of Manhattan comes to a close at the Sheep Meadow. The sun is setting, and the skyscrapers are turning into silhouettes of violet and gold. Elias Thornton stands at the edge of the grass, looking out at the thousands of people, the tourists, the dreamers, the joggers, and the quiet ones sitting on benches. People ask me if the park will be here in 100 years, Elias says, his voice fading into the evening breeze. I tell them the park is the 100 years. It's the only thing in this city that knows how to grow old gracefully. The buildings will be torn down and replaced. The streets will be repaved. But these rocks, these forgotten corners, they'll still be here, breathing through the concrete. Epilogue. The viewer's journey. To you, the creator and the audience, Central Park is a living document. It's a story of displacement, Seneca Village, survival, the 1970s, and resilience, the North Woods. When you make your video, remember that the quiet evolution isn't a finished process. It's happening right now. It's in the seed falling from a maple tree, the coyote stalking the Ramble, and the shadow of a new skyscraper crossing them all. The park is waiting for you to find your own forgotten corner. The secret catacombs of the infrastructure. Most people think the park is just dirt and rock. They don't realize that beneath the forgotten corners lies a subterranean world of brick and steam. In the 1860s, Elias says, his voice echoing off the damp masonry of a hidden tunnel, they built a massive system of brick-lined sewers and water vaults. These are the arteries. Without them, the park would be a swamp in a week. The evolution of the invisible. This is the mechanical evolution. We're standing in a vaulted chamber that looks like a cathedral. The bricks are handmade, each one stamped with the mark of a kiln that closed over a century ago. The evolution here is about the hidden support. The park is a high-tech machine dressed in a 19th century suit. We've replaced the old lead pipes with fiber optics and high-pressure steel, but the original brick vaults still hold the weight of the city. It's a literal bridge between the Industrial Revolution and the digital age. The Great Lawn and the evolution of sound. We emerge from the tunnels near the Great Lawn. In the 1930s, this was Hooverville, a shanty town of thousands of homeless New Yorkers displaced by the Great Depression. It was the ultimate forgotten corner of human misery. People forget that this was a place of survival before it was a place of frisbees, Elias muses. But look at it now. It's the quietest place in the city. The acoustic evolution. Scientists have measured the soundscape of the Great Lawn. Because of the way the surrounding trees and the dip in the land work together, it is an acoustic sink. The roar of the city hits the wall of trees and dies. The evolution here is sensory, Elias says. In the 1800s, the park was meant to be seen. In the 1900s, it was meant to be used. In the 2020s, it is meant to be heard. Or rather, not heard. Silence is the most expensive luxury in Manhattan, and the forgotten corners are the only places where you can still find it for free.
The Hermit of the Ramble. Elias pauses near a thicket of rhododendrons. In the early 1920s, he began, there were reports of a man, not a homeless man as we think of them today, but a hermit. He didn't beg. He didn't cause trouble. He lived in the deep crevices of the rocks near the azalea pond. The evolution of solitude. This man, according to the legends of the old gardeners, had created a sophisticated life within the forgotten corners. He had built a small stove out of discarded bricks and used the natural thermal heat of the Manhattan schist to stay warm in the winter.
The evolution here is about the park as a state of mind, Elias says. For some, the park isn't a place to visit, it's a place to disappear. The city is so loud, so demanding, that the quiet evolution for some New Yorkers is the act of becoming invisible. We still find nests today, cleverly hidden spots where someone has lived for weeks without a single tourist noticing them 10 feet away. The frozen lake tragedy of 1867. To understand why the park feels haunted in certain corners, you have to go back to a cold January day in 1867. Before the days of safety railings and constant patrols, the lake, near Bethesda Terrace, was a massive, unregulated skating rink. The ice broke, Elias says simply. Hundreds of people fell into the black, freezing water. It was a chaos of Victorian wool coats and heavy skates dragging people down. This tragedy changed the park forever. It led to the creation of the skating flag system, the famous white ball with a red ball that told New Yorkers when the ice was safe. But more importantly, it changed how we viewed the forgotten corners of the water. We began to fear the park's wildness. The evolution of the park's rules started there, Elias explains. We realized that this beautiful man-made paradise could still kill you if you didn't respect the elements. Every warning sign you see today is a ghost of a lesson learned 100 years ago. The Great Tree Heist and the Secret Graft. We move toward a peculiar-looking cherry tree. Its trunk is gnarly, but its branches bear two different types of blossoms in the spring. In the 1950s, a rogue gardener, no one knows his name, began a secret grafting project, Elias reveals. He was obsessed with creating a universal tree. He would take clippings from rare trees in the forgotten corners and graft them onto the common trees in the high-traffic areas. The evolution of guerrilla gardening. This was a quiet, illegal evolution. He was essentially backing up the park's biodiversity. If a rare species in the North Woods died, its DNA lived on in a graft in the South. We call them Frankenstein trees, Elias smiles. They are the ultimate survivors. They represent the human urge to intervene, to ensure that the beauty we love isn't lost to a single storm or a bout of Dutch elm disease. It's a silent rebellion against extinction. The future, the vertical forest. As our journey through the 50,000-word history of the park reaches its current page, we look at the Billionaires' Row skyscrapers that now cast shadows over the southern end. The evolution of light. The newest forgotten corner isn't on the ground, Elias says, looking up at the glass towers. It's the sky. These buildings are stealing the sun. The trees are literally leaning north, trying to find the light that these towers have blocked. The park is evolving again. The species that need 12 hours of direct sunlight are dying out, replaced by shade-loving mosses and ferns. The park is becoming a deep forest even in its open spaces. Central Park isn't a static park, Elias concludes. It's a slow-motion reaction to the city around it. As the city grows taller, the park grows deeper. As the city gets louder, the park gets more secretive. The eternal cycle. The sun is now fully above the horizon. The first joggers are appearing on the reservoir track. The yellow taxis are a constant hum in the distance. Elias Thornton turns a corner and is gone. Perhaps back to his workshop, or perhaps he was just another ghost of the Gilded Age himself. The quiet evolution of Central Park is the story of us. It is the story of what we save, what we bury, and what we finally choose to remember. From the displaced families of Seneca Village to the coyotes of the North Woods, the park remains the only place where New York City can look at its own reflection in the water and see who it really is. The stone that remembers. Elias leads us to a massive, jagged outcropping of dark rock near the 79th Street transverse. It's scarred with deep, parallel grooves. This is Manhattan schist, Elias says, his hand tracing the rough surface. These grooves, they weren't made by tools. They were made by glaciers 20,000 years ago. The ice was a mile thick here. It crushed everything in its path, but it couldn't break this stone. The evolution here is on a grand planetary scale. Central Park exists because this rock was too hard to blast away for the city's grid. The forgotten corners are often just places where the Earth refused to move. In the 1850s, they used 500 pounds of gunpowder every day to try and level this park, but the schist held its ground. The park's shape, the hills, the valleys, the hidden dells, is dictated by a prehistoric battle between ice and stone. We think we designed this park, but we really just decorated a glacial scar.
The ghost trees of the future. Elias stops at a sapling that looks slightly different from the others. Its leaves are a deeper silver green. "This is a southern live oak," Elias whispers. "Historically, they don't grow this far north. It's too cold. But the city is warming. We are planting ghost trees, species that belong in Virginia or the Carolinas, because by the time this sapling is a giant, New York will have the climate of Richmond." The evolution of anticipation. This is the most haunting part of the quiet evolution. The park keepers are gardening for a world that doesn't exist yet. They are looking 50 years into the future, predicting which forgotten corners will become wetlands and which will become dry savannas. "We aren't just preserving the past anymore," Elias says. "We are hosting the future." The park is a slow-motion migration. The birds are moving north, the insects are moving north, and we are helping the trees keep up. We have reached the edge of the park. The streetlights are humming, the taxis are screeching. The quiet evolution is behind us, tucked away in the shadows of the elms and the depths of the schist. Elias Thornton stops at the stone wall that separates the park from the sidewalk. He doesn't cross it. "This is as far as I go," he says. "The city belongs to you. The park belongs to time." The message for the audience. As Elias turns back into the darkness, the screen fades to black, leaving the viewer with one final thought. Central Park is not a finished work of art. It is a persistent, organic rebellion against the concrete. It is a place where the forgotten corners hold the secrets of who we were and the seeds of who we will become.
History is full of secrets, and we are just getting started. If you enjoyed this journey, make sure to hit the like button. It really helps the channel. What part of this story surprised you the most? Tell me in the comments. And if you haven't already, subscribe and turn on notifications so you're always the first to join us for our next deep dive. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.